Hello to our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Bring the World Home. This is a production of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii, and it's our program which each week allows us to explore the experiences of a volunteer who served with the United States Peace Corps in one of the 132 countries around the world that the Peace Corps has been invited to participate in. This evening we have a lovely couple, Dan and Lee Curran, who served in Nepal from 1990, and I'd like to show our viewers that we're out here in the middle of the Pacific in Hawaii, and about a quarter or a third of the way around the world on top of India is Nepal. This little green sliver of space here. And is this first of all, let me welcome Dan and Lee. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Is this a flag of Nepal here?
Yes. It's the world's only non-rectangular flag, too.
That is,
and
makes it unique right off the bat.
Nepal is also one of the world's few landlocked countries. It's completely landlocked. It's nowhere near the ocean.
For our viewers, Dan served as a fisheries consultant and worker in the Peace Corps service. Lee was in the field of
rural economic development.
Rural economic development.
I worked with Nepal Bank Limited.
Okay. So this is a fairly rare opportunity for us on Bring the World Home to have a couple who served in the Peace Corps, but as I understand it from our conversation earlier, you didn't enter the Peace Corps as a couple, is that correct?
No, we met in Nepal. We were both volunteers in the same district.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Was that, again, one of the aspects of our program is to stimulate people to explore the idea of becoming volunteers, hopefully in the Peace Corps, but in any kind of community service. And couples, sometimes one person wants to go into the Peace Corps and the other person doesn't, and that, of course, that can create a conflict. You both were volunteers, and how did you meet in Nepal? You were there already, or in you met in training, or?
I was still in training because I came in 1 year after he arrived.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I was posted to my district, and then I was sent back to the capital to train the incoming group, and she was one of the trainees in that group. And they had just recently opened up my district because it was considered too dangerous before that. And I came back to sell that district to incoming volunteers that it was actually a good place to live in a healthy environment. And that's where we met. And the family that she ended up living with in that district once she was posted wanted a loan for a fish pond. And as a representative of the Agricultural Development Office, I had to go over and sample their soil and measure it out and write up the loan application, and that's when we got to spend time together.
And on a personal level, it was love at first sight?
For me.
Okay. Well, we won't get too far into that. I have a map here of Nepal. Can you show me, Dan, about where you were when you say you were in this district?
Yeah, we were on the far west southern corner.
What was the name of the area?
Bardia.
Okay. Well, and as a volunteer working in the agricultural realm, specifically in fisheries, were you the first volunteer in the area that was doing this kind of work? Or
yes, I was. And
how were you accepted by the local people? Can you tell us your feeling of arriving in country, and they threw a big party for you and gave you the key to the village, or?
No, but it's a strange feeling to be on your own. Peace Corps does a good job during training of teaching you to be culturally sensitive, teaching you the language, teaching you technical skill, and then at some point they say, okay, you've graduated, and they throw you out. And it's up to you to make your contacts, to make your job work. Everything falls on you, and it's a kind of an isolating feeling. And then when you get to the district or the village, it's up to you to make the personal interactions and contacts that will actually lead to your success or failure as a volunteer. And being a very non-Nepali looking person, I almost always led a parade into every village I went into. The kids would follow me. It wasn't a touristed area, so they didn't ask for a lot, but they would all follow me, and it would be like leading a parade, and I was the head of the parade.
How did that feel?
It's very tough because you lose a sense of privacy that you get inculcated with your entire life growing up in America. So.
Well, you, let me go back a little bit. So your Peace Corps service started right after college? You went to college and got a degree in
fisheries biology.
And what school?
At Humboldt State. And
California. Humboldt.
Yes, Humboldt State University in California. And it's a very specialized degree, and I wasn't able to get a job in fisheries right off. And I had met a couple previous volunteers, and it sounded like a good idea. Plus, I could get experience in my field, and they would send me around the world to a beautiful place that I could experience and learn the culture of. So,
did the volunteers that you had met tell you you'd likely be a Pied Piper character in a village?
No, nobody really prepared me for that properly.
And you seem like a kind of shy, retiring person in the few minutes that we've spent together already. Is that put you on the spot when you get this kind of attention as a
to some extent
volunteer?
But it's something that you had to adjust to and get used to. The Peace Corps experience in Nepal, there were 13 people in our group, and I think only 4 of us actually completed service. It's very difficult for people to get used to all the aspects of living in another culture and having to disabuse themselves of all the ideas of privacy and community relationships that they grew up with.
Was it rewarding for you overcoming that?
Yes, it was life-changing and rewarding. And even for the people who left early.
We'll come to you in just a minute,
Sure.
Lee, but I want to explore just a little bit about the fisheries aspect, because it's a landlocked country. We don't really, I had no concept that this kind of program existed in countries. Obviously, it's to help feed the people, the local people. Is that the nature of the program, to provide a protein source for people in an area and to boost their ability to generate protein?
Absolutely, but it's also the aquaculture development project that I was involved in was to try and introduce different species of carp that the locals hadn't been consuming previously, and to get them into the market stream to add income to at the village level.
And whose idea was that? To introduce carp and to bring it as a more marketable...
It was His Majesty's government, the Agriculture Development Office's idea.
And was that, did the local people that you came to work with buy into that concept?
There was limited success.
Yeah.
I moved in with a family that had 2 fallow ponds that they couldn't keep full of water year-round, so they'd given up on aquaculture. And I helped them seal their ponds and get their ponds going and raise fish, and then they were able to sell fingerlings. Once, after a year, they were able to actually sell fingerlings to other farmers in the area. So it was successful at that small micro scale.
Well, that sounds pretty great by itself. I know that people here on the Big Island that are trying to start a small aquaculture program just for their own use, their own aspect, struggle accomplishing that same thing, getting water on an ongoing basis. But anyways, your contribution to the community was eventually embraced by the community, or people remain skeptical even after the small success that you experienced with the host family?
I think, well, I lived in a very small village, so within my village, people got to know me pretty well because I went out there and worked on the ponds every day, and they were very accepting of any changes and ideas and advice that I had to give. But I also worked as an extension agent for the agriculture office, and there is a bit of hesitancy to accept new methods and new ways of doing business in Nepal.
Well, you were very, you're a great spokesperson for the Peace Corps in the way that you describe the challenge that Peace Corps provides and the way that individuals, certain individuals, overcome, others don't. You said that only a small number of your original group served out their whole term. what do you think, just from an objective standpoint, what do you think makes a difference between those who don't get so completely frustrated with the challenges of their service and the ones who do?
Well, I think it's too individual to make generalizations. Some people were health related. It just couldn't adjust to the rice and lentil diet that was a day in and day out
Okay.
right of existence there. And then a lot of people also had trouble with the culture and just it's a very rural setting and a very demanding lifestyle. You have to basically do everything yourself, and some people just had troubles with that.
Yeah.
But there was no one reason why everybody, the ones who did drop out, dropped out.
Well, again, you're a very intelligent observer of, it seems to me, of life in general, and to be able to articulate, as you just did, the challenges that a volunteer comes up against. When you met Lee, then, did you give her much chance of surviving life
I was
in Nepal?
hopeful.
Or did you see that she needed some guidance from a veteran?
I actually didn't see her that often, other than writing that original loan application.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, I'd like to find out a little bit about your service.
Sure.
So you were in the same district,
Yeah,
Birdie
but about
widely
Sheila.
separated by miles and miles?
How many
or-
kilometers? Several kilometers we were
so
apart.
not too far away. And so you came a year or so after Dan had been in country, and you arrived as a fresh face. And did you know what you were going to be doing when you arrived?
I had some idea. I was working with rural income generation with the bank there.
Rural income generation, and whose moniker was that? Who labeled your service as such?
This came from the Peace Corps, but it was a pretty well-established program in the country.
Okay, and how did previous volunteers, if there were any, go about generating?
Well, actually, I was the first female, or one of the first female volunteers in my district, so they hadn't had any prior experience there with that particular program.
Okay, and so when you say you were the first female, there was, as a female Peace Corps volunteer, was there inherent resistance amongst your hosts
Oh, most definitely.
against women
I didn't
taking
have
this kind of leadership
Oh,
role?
definitely. I didn't have a lot of credibility at first. I was kind of looked upon as a curiosity. Dan referred to the Pied Piper. I think I got that, and perhaps even more so. Everything I did was scrutinized, and yeah, I got a lot of attention. And it was hard because we didn't have indoor plumbing, so we had to bathe outside, so the whole village would kind of gather when I was bathing, so that lack of privacy was really profound.
Well, it's the kind of thing that volunteers experience in a lot of cultures around the world, and it's certainly different than our American culture, that's for sure. The fact that you were there from, you told me earlier,
1988 through 1990.
So that's fairly recent, fairly contemporary history, and we're not too surprised that there's this prejudice against women.
Sure.
How did you develop a program? What was your concept of how to raise revenue in a rural area?
Well, I worked with Nepal Bank Limited, so initially when I got to my village, and when we received training in Nepal, we received training in language in Nepali. But we got to our villages and very few people spoke Nepali. A lot of the people we were working with spoke Taru, so that was something we had to embrace right away and learn some of the Taru language. But initially I'd go into the bank, kind of learn how their banking system worked, learn how they implemented their rural income generation program. It was done, we would form small groups of people who would support each other. One person in the group would get the loan, and then everyone else would make sure that they could pay it back, and then someone else was able to get the loan.
That sounds like a very self-sustaining program.
It was, and it was very successful. The rate of the payback of the loans was like 95%.
I think American banks and American economic entrepreneurs could take a lesson from that. Your idea of having the community kind of pass judgment on their fellow people. Was that their method or a Western method?
Well, no, it was a method designed by somebody with the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. And I can't recall the gentleman's name, but he's been with the bank for many, many years. And he developed that method, and it's widely used in Asia, and it's very much accepted.
And what were the types of projects that loan applications were made for?
Just very small, simple things like purchasing chickens that would give eggs, and as you mentioned before, the need for protein is very profound in Nepal. Also, they could sell the chickens, they could sell the eggs, and they'd have some income. Most people didn't have very much disposable income. So if their kids got sick or they wanted money for school fees and that, oftentimes they didn't have it. So this would provide the means to send kids to school, to purchase antibiotics or other medicines that the family might need.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. There was one woman who was a widow and she had several children. We gave her a loan and she purchased a used sewing machine, some fabric, some scissors, just basic sewing notions. And she started a very successful business, and she did quite well for herself, and she was able to support her kids by, you know, being a seamstress.
Mm-hmm. And again, were these ideas that these people had, these individuals had, was it typically their idea? That
Oh, most definitely. It was always generated by them. I'd go out into the village and I try to target the women, because oftentimes the women felt intimidated to come into a bank setting, and so they wouldn't. And so I would go out to, you know, the different villages, go to the homes, speak with the women, tell them what was available, some of the opportunities, and, you know, they would generate their own ideas on how they can utilize the program.
Well, both of you are very dynamic people. It's I'm getting the feeling more as we talk more.
I think it's the nature of Peace Corps volunteers. You have to be dynamic.
And so you facilitated this kind of entrepreneurship in your village. The area that you were dealing with, about how many people? Just off the top of your...
Maybe like 5,000 people.
Okay, and encompassing how many square kilometers or miles or?
I really don't have a good sense of that. What would
Not
you
too
say?
Big. Size of the Big Island?
Oh no,
not even?
No, it was much smaller than
The size
that.
of Kauai.
And then, so after success with a number of people in this area of starting their own small business, their own entrepreneurship, that's what you continued to do the whole time, or were there projects?
I did that. That was my primary project, but I also became involved in secondary projects. Once I gained acceptance in my village and people kind of knew what I was about and I had earned some respect, they asked me to teach English at their school. So I did some of that, and that's something I had never had any experience before, and I have a degree in international management. And so jumping into the education field was brand new for me, but I really liked it, and I kind of felt like I had an aptitude for it. So after we came back stateside, I did get a teaching credential, and that's what I do today. But in addition to that, in Nepal, similar to India, most 90% of the population are Hindus. The caste system is very much in place. So where I live,
sorry, the what is
the
it?
caste system, the social classes, and it's very well established. So a lot of the people were the Taru people. I referred to the ethnic people that the Terai region, but then there were also some higher caste people. So there was a school that was available, but usually just the higher caste students would be able to attend. They had the fees to pay to the schoolmaster, and it was more acceptable for them to go to school. And a lot of the Taru kids were not getting an education. So I saw this need for these kids to be attending school, but they weren't able to go to the school that was already established. So I worked with the Peace Corps Partnership Program, friends, family back in the States. A good friend who lives here now, Ron Bukevich, raised a tremendous amount of money through just bake sales and whatever he could do. And it financed purchasing the supplies to build a new school in our village.
That's a major accomplishment.
It was for the people, because they provided all the land and they actually made all the bricks.
Well, the pictures that you've given us that show the school and show some of the development there are, as our viewers see, it is a major accomplishment. It was a major building that you put together. This is something that and correct me if I'm saying it wrong, Taru?
Taru, you're correct.
Were they a racial minority within your community or within the country?
No, well, within the country they definitely were, but in the region where we lived, they were actually in the majority. But because they were considered of such a low caste, they just didn't have the opportunities some of the other people did.
That's what I wanted to kind of focus on, because it seems if they were a low caste, what little I know about the caste system in that part of the world, would they be considered, my question was going to be, would they be discouraged from starting their own school? But since they're in the majority there, they probably didn't have that kind of resistance.
There were a lot of factors against them. All the politics involved did make it difficult. We needed to obtain a lot of wood to fire the bricks, and just to get the permits to go into the forest and collect a lot of wood. It was very difficult, very time consuming. We had to jump through a lot of hoops to do that.
I understand deforestation is one of the major concerns of that part of,
it is indeed.
Of the country.
And I'm sure it's worsened considerably since we were there.
Were you able, Dan, to work with Lee on that aspect of the project, or you were still, your service was still pretty separate?
We each kind of did our own thing.
Well, that it sounds like a great thing that you did. Are you still in touch with people there?
Not so much. Nepal's gone through a lot of political upheaval since we left. In fact, Peace Corps has pulled out of Nepal. I think it was back in 2004. So at its best, communication was very, very difficult, and it's not any better today. So we've kind of lost touch with people. Yeah.
Again, the focus of our program is Bring the World Home. What do we as volunteers bring back with us? You said you had the experience of teaching and came back and have transitioned into teaching from international management. What are the things that you bring to your classroom? Are you a classroom teacher now?
I am indeed. I think the biggest thing is just that global awareness. You know, we tend to be very insular here on this island and not have too much awareness of what's going on. But I think that global awareness, and I try to bring that to my students.
You're at what level of
high school.
High school level, okay. And do you bring up your Peace Corps experience regularly with your
and
class?
sometimes they roll their eyes and like, oh, here she goes again. But no, they really enjoy hearing about it, and I bring in the photos and that. So.
And then Peace Corps has a program, and I'm showing my ignorance at the moment, the specific term for the where Peace Corps volunteers come into the school, one for an education day, basically.
Right.
Does your school here support that aspect? Are they, is your colleagues aware of your Peace Corps experience?
Yeah, most definitely. And I've gone into my son's class when he was in elementary school and shared my experience as well.
And Dan, how about you? How do you, if in any way, do you still feel the influence and share the influence, if at all, of your Peace Corps experience in your current
Absolutely.
work? You're still working in fisheries?
Yes, I am. But I also, just in terms of coming home, it seems like I'd learned to love volunteering for things. So both of us are on the youth soccer boards and other community activities, and we meet a lot of fellow returned Peace Corps volunteers through these groups that we had no idea even existed. So it seems like once you've gone through the Peace Corps experience, you learn that you're a part of a community and you must give back in order to make that community a healthier place for everybody.
Do you think that there's a way that we can inspire people to give more of themselves nowadays?
Only through providing an example of individual action. We're not much of preaching. We're not, like you said, evangelistic. We're not. We do things and we jump in. We're worker bees in most organizations. And by just providing that example of someone who gets in and does it, instead of someone who just talks about doing things and or snipes at the backside and argues about things. Yeah. We tend to be goal-oriented and we focus on something and we jump in. So.
And do you find that your experiences overseas really support a methodology of doing that when you're working in local organizations, in the ability to be collaborative or to sell people on the idea of working together and let's get it done? Is that?
I think so.
Yeah.
It encourages you to be more flexible, tap into resources that you perhaps wouldn't normally tap into. Yeah.
And to accept differences in others who don't want to do something and say, well, I'm just going to carry on.
Well, I hope in just a few seconds that we have left, I would like to have you folks come back sometime and explore even further if we ever have the opportunity and you have the time and inclination.
It'd be our pleasure.
You're really a great asset to our community, I can assure our viewers. I hope they have a chance to meet you personally because you're really are wonderful people. Thank you very much for your time and coming out and being with us on a family day.
Thank you.
To our viewers, we thank you again for joining us here on Bring the World Home, another edition. We hope you'll tune in each week and see what we have to offer, what our return volunteers such as Dan and Lee can bring in the way of new awareness and knowledge about people from all over the world and how we are all alike, how we can work together, how we can appreciate each other. We invite you to go to the Peace Corps website. And again, thank you, Dan and Lee Curran, for joining us, and thank you for your service and your participation in the community.
Thank you.
Aloha to our viewers.
जाने भए सैली